do it, Richard?
We can do it either way, actually, but I quite like opening it up. It gets a bit, you know, straggly, as it were, but it's worth it just because you get a bit of more of a conversation.
Yeah, okay, perfect. But please, just at any point, dip in and out with anything, because I think it's frustrating waiting to the end to ask questions, because sometimes there's something you want to ask halfway through and then you have to wait to the end, which is a little bit frustrating. So when we spoke, we just tried to work out when it was that we spoke about 5 weeks ago. And it was about the aftermath. And we talked about the fact we didn't think we'd be in aftermath by now. I mean, I personally think it's going to be quite a while yet. But what we did talk about was, based on where we are at right now, what do we believe in the context of what we do in our business, think that we can learn right now that we could use going forward? So that's been my framing. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do and why we are really passionate about the emotional stuff that we use. So you get a bit of context around that. I'm going to talk you through social pain in a bit of detail, because that is what the work we do is couched in. And then I'm going to share with you 3 other areas that I think, on the back of what's happened, is really key for us to learn from this. And then I'm going to share with you our rising vibrational scale, which is the backbone model of our brand that we use as a measurement tool and diagnostic. And it's useful all the time, but particularly right now with what's been going on, I think it's really helpful. And then you can download that, and I can send you the worksheet as well if you're interested in that too. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll probably go off piste. Who knows? It wouldn't be the first time. So Rising Vibe, we are culture consultants. And let me just, for some reason, the slide makes a, can everyone see the slide all right? Is it full in there? Is it being cut off? That's better. So we're culture consultants, and the way that we describe it really basically is we work with our clients to help them define or refine, and it's usually refine actually, the culture that they want in their business. So most of our clients will have some values or principles or a mission statement or a charter that actually doesn't mean anything to the wider organization. So we help them to bring that to life a bit, because the one, I guess, Google definition that we connect to around culture, because we like to keep things really simple at Rising Vibe, is the way of life of groups of people, meaning the way they do things. Yet a lot of clients that we work with wouldn't be able to articulate explicitly what they expect in terms of how people should be doing things and how they expect them to be in the business. So we help our clients bring that to life. We help them to establish where they are in context of where they want to be, and then we deliver learning and development solutions to move them from the A to the B. So very straightforward. The bit that is really key, I guess, in terms of the work that we do, is every single piece of culture work that we do, we challenge and support our clients to ensure that psychological safety is key within that culture. So making sure people are feeling safe, secure, and being able to work without the fear of negative consequences. And I don't mean by that, if we're not delivering, if we're not performing, if we're not doing what we need to do, of course there'll be consequence to that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being able to show up as you, being real, being open, being honest, being able to say what's really going on. If you're struggling, that you're struggling, without fear and without shame. So that is really key to us in terms of what we do. And the bullet point around people are the culture. We find, and I'm sure this will be very familiar to you guys, that most people in organizations, when things aren't working with the culture, will talk about the culture like it is separate to them. The culture is toxic. It's not a supportive culture. Actually, one of the first things we do is we challenge everyone we're working with within that organization to associate with the culture, because actually you are the culture. And I've had so many leaders that I've worked with say, well, yeah, it's just not changing still. And I say, okay, so what's your part in that? Because it's almost like it's everybody else's job. So that is really key. And we find that a lot, that people are just not connecting to it when it's not working. But when it is working, they want to be all over it, basically. So headline, that is what we do. One of our strap lines, I'll talk about calling out the men in a minute. One of our strap lines is using emotion to drive cultural change. So we are really overt about emotion. And so calling out the men is our brother brand. And we launched that at Mad World Summit last October, because Calling Out the Men is all about providing emotional support for men in business. Now, we are all about emotional, gender equality, gender parity completely. But actually, when it comes to emotional support, it's not balanced. If you Google support for women in business, the list is endless of information, data, workshops that you can access to help you. If you Google support for men in business or support for men in the workplace, you'll get a list of what men need to do to support women. And we all know about the mental health statistics out there about men. And I am someone who, just in my kind of, in the last 7 years, committed suicide. My dad is a recovering alcoholic. I've got a son who suffers with anxiety. My husband has moments of depression, and that is just in my circle. And what really triggered me to kick this off, actually, TV program about post-traumatic stress in the army. And he said, the thing is, Lou, luckily, I haven't experienced any of that stuff. I've not seen my friends die. I have not tried to help somebody escape from a burning Land Rover. So what's my excuse? And what I recognized in that moment was there are so many men I'm working with that look like they've got it all. They've got a great career, they're earning decent money, family, and they're struggling. And there's a lot of shame around the fact they're struggling because they don't have an excuse, they have a reason. So that really was one of the drivers behind launching Calling Out the Men. So it fits within Rising Vibe. Everything we do is the same, but we are deliberately overt about the man angle, actually, because there's just nothing out there for them. But why do we get really connected to the emotional stuff in the work that we do? Well, number one, we all feel. Some of us don't like to admit that we feel, but we do. Some of us like to deny it, but we all have emotions. We all know that. And emotion will drive whether or not we engage or resist something. So if we feel good about something, whether it's a project, a new task within our role, someone new in my team, my new lead, engage, be up for the challenge, prepared to learn. If I don't feel good about it, I'm going to resist it. So we get underneath barriers to change by really getting underneath what are people feeling about that and why are they feeling it. We're also hardwired for connection and need a tribe for survival. So the reptilian brain, as we all know, is still firing in exactly the same way it did back in caveman days. And if we were back then not in a tribe, we would have died. And we still feel that stuff. If we are ousted, if we are alone, we don't feel safe. And at some level, unconsciously, we believe we're going to die. So we need that connection. We need that emotional connection with other beings. It's key. We're hardwired that way. And social pain, as a result of that, is real. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. So, this stuff we work with day by day anyway, but COVID-19 has completely magnified what we call low vibe emotions. And I'll talk to you a bit more about that when I get to the scale. They are greater than ever right now. Fear, anxiety, despair, helplessness, insecurity, all of that kind of stuff. A lot of guilt, actually, with some of our clients for the ones that are still enrolled versus the ones that have been furloughed or made redundant. The survivor guilt thing is big. And actually, I was just speaking to Richard at the beginning of this, that a lot of our clients at this stage, and I don't know what your experience is, are starting to talk about fear and anxiety around going back to work. I don't want to go on a packed train or a bus, or I don't actually, what we can do about distancing and what are the controls, what are the measures. All of a sudden, there's a load of anxiety around that. Whereas before, I think it was the uncertainty was driving the biggest amount of fear. But that feels like that is now a big issue for people. So aftermath is a very interesting word, right? So I Googled it because I like to Google things. Thank God for Google. And consequence result, the period immediately following a usually ruinous event. What a great word ruinous is, by the way. But I really like this, a second growth crop, which is after harvest, what comes next. So actually, I thought metaphorically for this, that was brilliant because, we don't need to be reminded, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I'm a bit obsessed with focus of attention and lenses we look through and language that we use. Ruinous, my husband uses very extreme language. I'm not going to tell him about that because I think he'll start using it. For me, a second growth crop is really enabling. It opens up possibility and opportunity to me. So I'm going to be talking about this as a second growth crop. So what are opportunities for our second growth crop? on the back of what we've learned so far from this thing. So there's been some widespread learning, which will be familiar to all of you, I'm absolutely sure, but I wanted to share that. So the perspective about what's important, and actually I thought I had pretty good perspective, but I have really noticed, especially in my marriage, what a pain in the ass I am actually with, you know, I have the business. My husband has always been the carer. He's looked after the kids. He's been around for the kids. And I have not appreciated that until I've been at home, really. So that's been my perspective, but people are getting loads of perspective, you know, spending time with their family. Actually, I didn't realize how much I didn't know these people. Some people spending time with their family and going, Jesus, this is awful. What am I doing here? The people actually who, I've got a couple of friends who are single by choice, live on their own, and always say, I just like being on my own. And actually they're saying, actually, I'm not quite sure I do like it quite so much. And I've been put in a situation. So the perspective is huge for everybody. And there's been a variety of that. Work-life balance, so I like to call it work-play balance, actually, because for me, you know, life encapsulates both of that. I definitely know that I am not going to work the same way I worked before this. And I didn't think I'd be saying this. And actually one of my exec coaching clients, who's the chief exec of a big gardening company, he is a real stickler for be in the office by 8:30 and do not leave the office before 6 o'clock. And if you do, you're not doing a great job. I caught up with him last week and he said, I'm actually going to work from home 2 days a week after this. I didn't realize how much commuting was taking it out of me or taking out of my day. So I think we've all realized that. Was there something in the chat? How have others perspective? Right, yeah, good. Working from home, I mean, I would not want to be a landlord for one of these big, beautiful offices in London anymore. I think there's going to be a lot of perspective around, actually, do we really need these fixed costs? Do we really need these overheads? Is it really necessary? And the interesting, the working from home, I think some people were dreading it and have loved it. And some people were dreading it and have hated it. So I don't think that's it, it's over. But for sure, I think people are going to start looking at things differently. I think what's happened with this is that people have had to be trusted. And I'd love to know what your experience has been around the working from home thing. We work from home, so we're completely set up for that. But I know a lot of people, the lack of trust, the lack of control as a leader around their kind of team has really stopped them wanting the working from home. And because we've been forced into doing that, I think some people have realized actually we're still functioning okay. It's not been a drama. The need for freedom and choice. So autonomy is one of our fundamental, we have three core fundamental psychological needs. Autonomy is one of them. So empowerment, but sense of choice and actions are of own will. I think people have really recognized how strong a need that is. I know when we went into lockdown on that 23rd of March, even though I totally agreed with it, by the way, I was totally aligned with it. You know, I would have gone, yeah, we need to do this. I felt a sense of panic that I was being told what to do. I felt panic that I was being told I wasn't allowed to, you know, go out and about whenever I wanted to do it. So I think that has really hit people actually. And the need for connection, which I'm going to talk to you about a lot. So relatedness is the way that it is described here, for our need to interact and for social connections. And that's a no-brainer, right? So many people now have realized how important that is. I am done with screen time. I do a lot of work globally anyway, so I, you know, work online and remotely, but just not being able to, I'm not a massive hugger actually. I like hugging people, I like to hug, but I really felt that not having that, being able to give someone a kiss, giving someone a hug. And Amy, you talked about, you've got that news and you want to be in the office, and that for me, it's obvious to me because I love being around people. I understand the connection need, but there's a lot of people that I've worked with who have suggested it's not important to them, and now they really realize that it is. So on that, actually, let me get into my bit of stick. I want to talk to you about social pain. So social pain is anything associated, it's what we experience when we associate anything around disconnection from another being or another tribe. So sense of loss, when we feel rejected, excluded, isolated, conflict with somebody else, that interpersonal conflict, if we feel misunderstood, if we feel undervalued, we feel judged, we feel like we don't have influence or we don't feel heard, this triggers social pain. So social pain is rife. It was rife before this. We are humans. This is what we experience. And what is very interesting for us with the work that we do, because we talk about emotion, and we're very overt about all emotion, you know, not just the stuff that is always encouraged in business, like positivity, motivation, focus, purpose, passion. Of course, that is so important in business. And when we're really feeling it, it's brilliant. But all the other words around, you know, shame, despair, helplessness, anxiety, guilt, insecurity, they're not necessarily encouraged. But if people are feeling them, they're feeling them. And a lot of people that we start working with, there'll always be a few skeptics. I mean, I love a skeptic. There's nothing wrong with being a skeptic. But what has really helped us is the neuroscience behind this work. And physical pain and social pain activate the exact same brain circuitry. So there's part of your brain that is called the anterior cingulate. And if I was to fall over and break my leg, my anterior cingulate would light up because I'm in pain. If I feel rejected, the anterior cingulate will light up. And what is really fascinating about this is the more significant the injury or the pain physically, the longer and the brighter the light will shine. The same thing is true for social pain. The more significant the other person or persons are, the longer and brighter the anterior cingulate will light up for. And what is really so important to know about this is it doesn't take much to be in social pain. And one of the experiments, they've done many, but one of the experiments that they did was something called cyberball. And it was a virtual game where I think that between 30 and 50 people were hooked up to this game virtually. So hadn't met, hadn't seen each other, had not heard each other speak. And their brain activity was measured. And basically it was a very simple game of catch virtually. So a number of balls being thrown, and you could throw the ball to somebody else. So there was no name or anything, it was just a number pretty much attached. One by one, people were taken out of the group or blocked so that no one could see them, so they couldn't have the ball thrown to them. The anterior cingulate lit up. So even being excluded from a tribe that we have no real strong connection with, we are still in pain. So if you think about the obvious, people that we love, we're going to experience social pain. But actually, there might be people in business you don't love. I'm sure we can all name quite a few of those. We might not love them, but actually they're significant in terms of our business survival. So they can impact our career. They're on our project. They can help us achieve our objectives, our outcomes or not. If we are not connected to them, we're going to be in more social pain than we would be if we were rejected by somebody on the bus and we said hello later in the morning. And how this has really helped us is that we hear a lot of leaders saying, well, you paid a lot of money, you're a manager, you don't get on with X, you just need to go over and get on with it. Now, there is part of that, by the way, that I do connect to. We're in business. We need to find a way around it. But this highlights the severity of this stuff. And anyone who's been in any chronic or physical pain, I'm lucky enough not to really, but in the last few weeks, no surprises, have had headaches and eye pain from being online so much. And a couple of days I felt really knackered at the end of the day because I've had a constant headache. That is, you know, a very mild version of chronic physical pain. There are people in the world and in business in chronic social pain who don't feel connected, who don't feel safe. So if you imagine how tired I felt at the end of the day, having a headache all day, it's obvious why that was for me, because actually I had a headache all day. There are people in business in social pain who are not aware of that and are feeling really tired, lacking energy, struggling with motivation. It's no surprise. And the challenge is, it isn't just something that doesn't feel good. This will physically impact us as well. So the other great news is that not only do we experience social pain consistently on a regular basis, we are also constantly evaluating social threat. So what that means is we are anticipating social pain before it's even happened. So a classic example of this will be giving feedback, right? Because we all know the feedback conversation is always something that causes the majority of people some discomfort and worry. So I'm about to go and give Richard some feedback. And actually I've got a good relationship with Richard. You know, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable about it, but actually I'm all right, I'm going to do it. It's not a problem for me to do it. However, I will already be thinking about, what if he misunderstands me? What if he disconnects from me because of this? What if he doesn't like the feedback, doesn't buy into it, and then he excludes me from future meetings, or. So even before I have actually been misunderstood, rejected, or excluded, I am feeling the pain of that. If that makes sense. So this is really significant. Public speaking, another classic. So many people struggle with presentations, speaking at conferences. The fear of judgment is so big for all of us. And most people are in extreme social pain before they've even been judged, because they're expecting to be judged. So this stuff is around all the time. And I love the statement, which is self-awareness is curative. For me, just knowing this is really helpful. There's loads of people who don't know it. There's loads of people who don't realize why they're so crippled a lot of the time by this stuff. So a couple of comments, let me just check. There's no questions in there. So I keep clearing my throat. I've got such an annoying frog in my throat today. I've seen both sides, lots of people myself. Yeah, missed the community. Yeah. We're now planning to close offices. Departments that were previously resistant to working from home are getting used to it. People are missing the social contact, and virtual coffee breaks are not as adequate a substitute, but the best we have. Absolutely. We're all doing the best we can, but it's hurting. This is really difficult for all of us. Also, when we're in social pain, in exactly the same way as when we're in physical pain, cortisol, the stress hormone, is released. Now, if we have consistent cortisol being released, it increases anxiety, it can trigger depression, it exhausts us, and it impacts our ability to heal. And I know for sure there are people that I work with and in my life who were suffering with anxiety before COVID even hit. So they would have been releasing cortisol on a regular basis even before this happens. This has just magnified their anxiety. So there are so many people out there who are, and I don't know if any of you have heard of adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is a result of increased ongoing cortisol being released into the system because adrenals become drained. This is another, this is a physical thing. It physically impacts us as well as mentally. And if you are someone who is more prone to aggression, so in the fight, flight, freeze, when we're vulnerable, fight, flight, freeze, if you're a fighter, I'm a fighter, and you're more likely to be angry, resentful, blaming, justifying, defensive, then you are going to experience social pain more intensely. If you're someone who suffers with anxiety, generally, you're going to feel social pain more intensely. If you're more introverted, you're going to experience it more. And if you have what we call high emotionality, which is you feel tension and apprehension quite strongly, then you're going to have a more intensified social pain experience. So this is really important to know, that there are people out there in your workplace, and some of them not realizing this, and some of them just not talking about it, actually. So it doesn't feel good, and it's not good for us. It's actually not good for us physically. I don't know why this keeps happening with the slides, but okay. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with some of these stats, and this is pre-COVID, this is from last year. So this is the impact on the workplace and business, right? So absenteeism last year, 17.5 million days lost from a mental health challenge. So depression, anxiety, stress. Presenteeism, which right now I'm hearing a lot more about that as well. People who are having to go out into the operation, because there's still some people having to go out into the operation. This might be true for some of you guys in your businesses, and they really don't want to. They're feeling really anxious about it. So they're there, but they're not really present. They're there, but they're worried. So they can't really be effective. Low morale, being at your desk, being in the office, but just not really being present. Not feeling great, but not wanting to say you don't feel great. So you're showing up, but actually you're not doing a great job. Leavism, people taking holiday to catch up, and actually people working on holiday. And I believe the reason that people were rarely offline before this, because obviously right now it's our only option, was because people didn't feel connected enough and were experiencing social pain. So in October last year, someone in our team went to Australia to see her sister, had a baby. She's going for 3 weeks, and she said to me, just so you know, I'll check my emails. And I said, I don't want you to check your emails. Categorically, I do not want you in the business. It's 3 weeks. And she didn't. And I know why she didn't, because she has a relationship with me where she feels safe enough to know I meant it when I said it. And for me, there's a lot of people who will say, you don't need to be online. I don't want you to be online on holiday. Yet they send emails when they're on holiday. So they feel the need to respond, or they send emails when they're on holiday. So this thing about taking time off or being off but not really being off, I think is growing. Exit interview data will cite social pain every time, because that's when people will be feeling safe enough to say what it is that they really mean. And work-related stress, any research you see will cite an element of social pain. even, and it comes up a lot, lack of role clarity. What stopped you asking for role clarity? You didn't feel safe enough. And 59% of us have experienced work-related stress. So it's a big thing. So these, I guess, are the challenges I am hearing from our clients on a regular basis. And I guess my first takeaway in terms of, if we can't learn this now for the future, we're never going to learn it. People are saying, how do you communicate, collaborate, and help people stay motivated when working remotely? Managing performance, activity, and progress remotely, I'm finding that really difficult. Working from home, either I'm on my own, so I'm struggling, or I've got family here and they're getting on my nerves, getting them away. You know, I've got a teenager here back from university. He's actually been fine. My 11-year-old daughter has been a pain in the ass. You know, homeschooling, she's just struggling, keeps interrupting me. There's people actually who have people in their family who have been furloughed or made redundant, and that's really impacting them because they care about them and they're not in a great space. Homeschooling is a big issue for people with children. So the whole working from home thing is causing a lot of pain. The fear of the virus itself, obvious one, you know, which ultimately leads to the ultimate social pain, which is loss, because people are afraid of dying. I feel like, I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like that's eased off a little bit now, and people are now more concerned about the getting back to work. I feel like it's shifted a little bit. I think that's definitely going on, but I feel a shift. Teams becoming disconnected with an impact to trust. This has been really interesting. Teams that I've worked with for years who have been really tight, and either some of them, there's kind of two camps for me, some that be going out into the operation and some working from home. And there's become a bit of a, it's not fair, we've had to go out and work. What are they doing from home? The people at home struggling with the relentless, I'm working from a kitchen table, I'm cooking in the kitchen, and I don't feel like I'm actually switching off at all. I'm doing loads of work, and that is breaking down a little bit of trust between some of the teams. And then just some of the guys who are not together in the office, not feeling as connected as they were, and not feeling as safe, not actually addressing and raising some of the issues they would have before online. And I am very interested with that, because some of the teams I work with have been really, really tight. And actually just really feeling the impact on some of the colleagues. So some people are saying to me, and I'm sure all of you have seen it, and I really like it as a metaphor, that we're in the same storm, not the same boat. There are some people who are loving this pause, right? Some people are going, I'm learning loads from it. Some people genuinely really struggling. And some of the people I've worked with and spoken to have said to me, I'm really struggling because I'm okay. I'm actually quite enjoying this, and I feel a lot of guilt around that. And I know how hard it is some of the people are that I'm working with. So I guess the first takeaway for us from this is, and we've got 4 of them, is social pain is real. We always knew that. It hurts, it impacts our performance. And if we can't learn more about this, even if you haven't got the social pain, you know, background to it, then I don't think we're gonna, if we don't learn this, what are we gonna learn from that? Let me have a look at the chat. Is there anything here? Hang on. Yeah, social anxiety about being with others due to the fear of the virus. Actually, absolutely. It's really interesting, actually, Sean, because I hadn't had any fear about getting the virus at all. I was, you know, going, if I get it, I get it. We're all going to get it at some point. Just make sure the NHS can cope. I was very cool about it. And then one weekend, I hit a really low point. I think everyone has had a low point. And I go shopping for my mum and dad, and I was in the shops, and I was picking food up, and I'd washed my hair, and it was all fluffy, and I kept touching my face. And I was panic-stricken about, I'm touching my face, I'm going to get the virus. And it was really interesting because I hadn't had any of that going on at all. And I think this just shows how we're a bit like that. One minute you think you're not worried about something, the next minute you are. So the next thing, and I love this quote, nature attains perfection, but man never does. I'm not a perfectionist. And I love the nature thing, because I think there's one thing we've all seen around the world. I don't know if anyone saw the picture of Delhi with the beautiful blue sky rather than the usual smog and stuff. Nature has really come into its own during this time. But what I have really loved, and this is, I'm all about this anyway, and the brand is all about this, is we don't do perfection, we love imperfection. And this has really challenged the perfectionists out there. So just the technology, the fact that, you know, people are dipping in and out of connectivity, people are having to learn stuff. And when we're learning, we're never going to do it perfectly, ever. There's a lot of discomfort for people who are doing this kind of thing. And because they're so uncomfortable and it's out of comfort zone, they're not showing up as they normally would. And I have absolutely loved being on some webinars and some, you know, Zoom workshops where it's gone wrong. Because actually I think the fact it's gone wrong, yet we've still achieved the results we wanted to achieve. We've still done what we've needed to done. It just proves you don't need to be perfect. I've also loved the humanized leadership stuff. This is our frame on it, where people are at home, you know, like me. I've got a relatively smart top on, but I've got shorts and my flip-flops on. I know that, I don't even know when it was, but we all remember in the news when that guy was having an interview on the news and his child came in and the wife tried to drag the baby out of the, I mean, that's kind of going on in every living room at the minute. I had a situation where my son was out on the decking here playing grime music really loud, doing his weights when I was doing a webinar, and I had to say, I just need to speak to my son. I'm getting interrupted by my daughter, people's cats walking across the screen, kids shouting and screaming. Actually, I think it's absolutely bloody brilliant because our masks are off. We are seeing people for who they really are. And actually the bit that for me is the biggest piece of learning in terms of aftermath of this is excellence does not require perfection. It doesn't. And there are so many people out there who are so obsessed about things being perfect. And what we know to be true about perfection is perfectionists will seek out imperfection. Perfectionists will never actually get it right and get it perfect. So this for me is another one. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're still delivering stuff. We're doing what we need to do. We're getting by without the perfection. Right, hang on a minute. Sorry, I'm trying to, because the chat's going up and down and I can't move my slide properly. Oh, hang on, I've gone too far. Not for the first time. Right. This is my quote. Oh, no, it's not. I've gone too far. I have gone too far. Let's go back. Right. Throwing the dinosaur in the bin works. So this, for me, I am a big one, as I said at the beginning, about, I am a huge fan of holding people to account. And it's a big thing that we're known for at Rising Vibe. When my son was 3, I took him swimming every Saturday. And Charlie was a great little swimmer. And he never wanted to get out of the pool. And one day he swam away from me. And I grabbed him and I got him out the pool and he was kicking and screaming and all slippery and I nearly dropped him and everyone was looking at me and I was thinking, God, it looks like I can't control my child. Clearly I couldn't control my child. So I was not in a great space. And we went to the changing room and I sat him down and I told him off and he kicked me. And I said to him, if you kick me again, your dinosaur's going in the bin. And he was obsessed with dinosaurs. And he had this lovely rubber dinosaur called Henry. And he looked me in the eyes, straight in the eyes, not blinking, and kicked me again. So I took Henry and I put him in the bin. Charlie was distraught. He's 19. To this day, he remembers it. I remember driving home from the gym, and when children cry so bad that they are, you know, they're sobbing and they can't, and he's so tired from the crying, he fell asleep, and I cried. I remember crying, thinking, what kind of mother am I? However, for me, and I use this story a lot with our clients, and often it will come up and people will say, well, he didn't throw the dinosaur in the bin. If there is no implication and we don't hold people to account, things will not change. And for me, the evidence has been in lockdown. And there are some people breaking the rules, right? We know that. There are people breaking the rules. There are, but I think they're in the minority. We just tend to focus on them. You know, at my local common, there were police vans driving around, checking if people were with people from their households, and if they weren't, splitting them up. In Spain, I have a couple of friends in Spain, in Barcelona, they were not allowed to leave their homes at one point. They were on complete lockdown unless they had a pass to go to the pharmacy or the supermarket. If they didn't have a pass, they got a fine, they were sent back home. When we truly hold people to account, and there is implication, things change. And in my experience, so much change does not happen in business. And we invest a lot of time and money, and it doesn't work because we don't hold people to account. So I put expected and accepted here, because this is the way that we talk about culture, actually. You can be very explicit about what you expect. But if you accept something different, there's absolutely no point in doing that. And for me right now, I'm spending most of my time in the house shouting from another room, don't shout from another room. So I'm saying, we don't shout from another room around here, and then I shout from another room. In business, that is going on all the time. And, you know, sticking with the feedback conversation, if we here as a team, we committed as part of our culture, we absolutely have first-hand conversations, no second, third-hand feedback. We have a conversation with the person we need to have a conversation with, and we all commit to that. That's very explicit. That is straightforward. And Amy has a problem with Richard. So Amy comes to me and says, I need to give Richard some feedback. We talk it through, nothing wrong with that. And then Amy goes and gives Richard the feedback. Brilliant, excellent, staying true to what we agreed. If Amy talks to me about Richard, she has a bit of a rant, she offloads, I collude a bit because I've got a similar experience. We have a great conversation, Amy goes on her way because she feels better. And I don't challenge Amy to go and have the conversation with Richard. I'm actually not helping at all. And that is going on everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Holding people to account doesn't happen in my experience, even in meetings. You know, I hold people to account in meetings. I say, if you need your laptop on, if you need to take a call, not a problem, you're grown-ups, just don't do it in the room. Yeah, no problem. Within 10 minutes, people have got their laptops out. You can feel the discomfort when I then call it again. And this is social pain, by the way. This is social pain. What stops us holding people to account is social pain. But the evidence from this situation has proved how it helps. If we don't have boundaries and implications, nothing will change. And we are hardwired to see change as a threat, not a reward. So we're actually hardwired to avoid change. So this is why it's a challenge. So we really do need support and challenge to help us break these patterns. And I think this situation has absolutely taught us that. It's proved the point, I guess, that I've been banging on about a lot. So accountability is the glue that ties commitment to the result. I love that. But for me, this has been reinforced. So I don't think it's new, but I think it's really proved the point. Let's hang up here, let's have a look. Hang on. Yeah, definitely. The mask coming off is definitely making people feel uncomfortable for sure. Because we like to hide ourselves, right? A lot of us like to hide the vulnerability, the vulnerable part of ourselves. So the other final piece of learning that I think is really, again, this is so important to me and in our business, but being explicit. And I am not remotely political, just for the record. And I would not want to be the Prime Minister right now, just for the record. And I think the government are doing the best they can in the situation they've got, right? I don't get involved in that. But what I would say is Boris's speech video on that Sunday was not explicit. It was artfully vague in places, and actually it's really unhelpful. I think we have to keep it as simple as possible and say, you can do this, you can't do that. Which sounds really basic, but in my experience, the number of people I'm working with that don't know explicitly what is expected of them and don't want to ask. Well, I probably should know. I don't really want to say, what is it you expect of me again? And actually one of the tools we use, our 6 C's, absolutely means people check in around, do you know what's expected of you on a regular basis? Because one day you might, the next day you might not know. The other bit that is been highlighted by this is misalignment and mixed messaging. So anyone who saw any of the newspapers and the media on the Thursday before the last bank holiday saying lockdown was over, and then Boris saying, actually, it's not over, but we're releasing it a little bit, stay alert rather than stay at home. I mean, what does stay alert mean? By the way, I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying it is not explicit. Stay alert means this. Stay at home is very explicit. Stay at home makes sense. The rest didn't. The messaging in the papers, and then Boris's, it just gave people an excuse to say, well, it wasn't clear, that's why I'm going out. And in business, it'll be exactly the same thing. It didn't make sense, it wasn't clear enough. If people want an excuse not to do something or deliver on something, saying it wasn't explicit enough is a really easy one to go to. And of course, what we know is deletion, distortion, and generalization are always in play. We have that veil across our face, which based on our beliefs and our map of the world and what we believe to be true about someone, something, situation, we will delete certain information and distort it and generalize it. And those people out there who despise Boris would never have said he was explicit, even if he was. The people that do like him will go, and actually, I thought it was a good speech. This is what happens. And this happens in business all the time. And I believe we can be explicit even when we don't know. So I just did an interview with Michael Ockwell. I live down in the south, and he's the chief exec of Mayflower Theatre down in Southampton. So the arts have been hit really hard. And we had a great conversation. And actually, it's one of our Zoomcasts, which we'll put on our website if you're interested in watching it. We're releasing it next week. And he talked about how, even though he has not got any answers about the external world situation, he has been so explicit internally. So when Boris did his interview and said, he talked about hospitality potentially getting back, a little bit of that opening back June, July time, he didn't explicitly mention the arts. So what he did, Michael contacted every single one of his team. He's got 250 people and 85% on furlough. and he contacted each one and left a message saying, just to be explicit, I'm not bringing you back in, for example. So we can be explicit about what we don't know, if nothing else. So again, piece of learning for me from this is clarity and simplicity are the antidotes to complexity and uncertainty. We need to be clear about what we do know about. Even if we've got loads of unknown, we absolutely can be explicit about what we do know. I think I've got one more slide. Oh, hang on. So I'm being a little bit, I feel like my mum here, I'm saying out loud what I'm thinking. This is what my mum does. So I guess our rising vibe frame of a second growth crop, right, is social pain is real, it hurts, it impacts our performance. We have to accept the fact that people are in pain when they're not connected. So what can we do to nurture more of an environment where people can be more honest about that at least? Excellence does not require perfection. Accountability is the glue that ties commitment to the result. We absolutely need to hold people to account, and then things will change. I know it's uncomfortable for people, but I would choose the discomfort over the resentment every day. Discomfort of actually holding someone to account over the resentment of not doing it, then feeling frustrated something hasn't happened. Clarity and simplicity, the antidotes to complexity and uncertainty. And I love this as a statement. I think it is so relevant right now. There's only one thing that is more painful than learning from experience, and that is not learning from experience. And the last thing I wanted to show you was our rising vibrational scale. So this is what we use, and we've got a worksheet that goes with it. And as a base level entry point for this, using it as a way to check in with people around how they're feeling is really powerful. Because actually emotional literacy and language around emotion, especially in business, is very, very, very narrow. So if you think about the words on the right, which we call low vibe emotions, not right, wrong, good, bad, just low vibe. Frustrated, irritated, impatient, that's pretty, you know, people use that a lot, that's pretty safe. Feeling stressed can be used a lot, but actually the rest are rarely owned and encouraged to be owned. If someone's feeling it, you encouraging it isn't going to make any difference. It was there already. And what we talk about is high and low vibe emotions, not good or bad, because the only time they impact is whether or not they're helping us achieve an outcome or not. So, for example, my dad is, you know, he's got a lot of underlying health issues. He's not well, he's had to be shielded. He's got diabetes type 2. It's very lifestyle led. And I feel quite angry with him, if I'm honest. And then I feel very despairing about it. Now, feeling angry about it and feeling despairing about my dad is not good, bad, right or wrong. But if I want to come and do this with you guys and I'm focused on that, it's not going to help me do my best job. It's not wrong. It's not going to help me. If I want to sit and have a good old cry about my dad and the state he's currently in, feeling despair is going to support that. It's going to help me. So that is how we talk about this stuff. Is how you're feeling supporting what you need to achieve here or not? Because there's too much labeling in a very binary way around emotion, which is preventing people being honest about it, because there's so much shame associated with not feeling good, especially from men. So if you want to know more about this, because I'm just mindful of time, if you want to know more about this, absolutely get in touch and I can send you the worksheet. And the worksheet is a bunch of really fantastic coaching questions that helps you consider what you want to feel better about. It's underneath how you're feeling about it, what thoughts you're having, where's your focus of attention that's driving those feelings, how you want to feel instead, and then helps you shift very slightly baby step perspective. Because we're not about quantum leaping, we're not about being positive all the time, we're about how do you feel better about something. So I can send you that, but this is what we use to help people access how they're feeling. And what's great about it is you can talk about this in a very disassociated way. So rather than saying I'm feeling insecure, you can say I'm around a number 20. It means people feel safer to have that conversation. So I think that is it. I think I'm about a little bit over, but.
Thanks, Lou. No, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. We've got about 10 minutes for questions, so people feel free to. I've unmuted you all, so I would like to go first. Anyone you like, and we'll manage the situation, as it were, as we go along. I have to say I was quite intrigued by your holding people to account point, Lou, especially with when it's leaders. If you're holding people to account upwards, I don't know if anyone's interested in that, for instance. One thing that struck me, how you do it, basically.
Well, and I'd love to hear what you guys think, but actually, for me, how you do it in exactly the same way. But for me, it's about contracting. early on in terms of how you work with somebody. It is more of a challenge if you've never done that before, and then you want to change the way you show up with somebody and you want to start doing it. For me, it's about transparency. So when I start working with people, I'm very clear about, with the clients, with the team, this is what's important to me. This is what I need to be at my best. One of those things is I love straight, direct, transparent conversations, and I like being explicit. That's what I do, and that's what I really appreciate. You can't make people be explicit and be transparent with you, but actually I role model it. And in my team, that's easy, right? When I start working with clients, I also talk about that and say, this is what you'll get from me. What do you need? We have that contracting conversation up front. It's more of a challenge for people who have had, I guess, ongoing longer term issues with someone senior. And for me, and when people do this, when they're brave enough to do it, it has never not worked and had a helpful response to just go and be honest and say, I am struggling to be my best when I'm working around you because I've got some stuff that I'd like to share that I feel really uncomfortable to share, or your version of that. I really would like our relationship to feel better. I would really like to feel more comfortable around you because I think you're going to get better of me if I do that. How could we have a conversation about it? That for me is the best way, just to be vulnerable about it. Now, if someone rejects you from that, I think you need to think about where you're working. That would be my response to that. But that's never happened, actually. In my experience, they've done it. Because ultimately, if you think about the whole social pain thing, everybody needs to connect. Everybody wants to connect. And senior leaders, every time I've ever given feedback to anyone senior, they've really appreciated it because they're giving feedback.
Well, let's see.
What relieved you become.
Well, let's see what others' experience is of that, because that's an interesting point. When other people have given feedback, how's it gone down along those lines?
I mean, the last bit that Lee said around senior people want it, I've definitely had the feedback, not just in my current place, but other places. There's very few people that are honest with them because their reports report into them. There's a power dynamic, and having that HR lens, there isn't that. So you're probably one of very few that can hold the mirror up. I found it easier when you took that contracting in, that was a really lovely way to describe it, but there's that relationship and you've got an understanding. And I would often use the phrase, like, I want to be your friend, but I'm going to be a critical friend. Does that work for you? Etc. And most people want it. Some people are like, sometimes they do want a friend, but yeah, I find it welcomed. I've been at my current place just over a year. I did a 360 review after a year, and it was one of the common things that people like, my willingness to share feedback, different opinions, put forward my ideas. So, I mean, unless I'm naive to it, like, yeah, I think it's all about that.
I think it's really important as well, because obviously I'm a bit obsessed about being explicit. I know that 360 feedback and everything it's